I went to Syracuse University, and not knocking my education, it was very good, but when we went into the studio, my teachers overwhelmed me because they were like, here's all this equipment, you have to know all these different numbers, all these different formulas, this goes here, that goes there, and I felt like a lot of students wouldn't actually go into the studio because they were so overwhelmed. So many pieces of equipment, it's all expensive, people get really afraid, you have to know all these formulas. My approach is make it look good. Because if you look, I'm sure you've taken beginner photo classes and you learn, don't blow out the highlights, you learn maybe you want 2 to 3 steps difference between foreground and background, there's all these rules. You learn rules for a reason, it makes it look good. But if you feel like if you break the rules that you're doing something wrong and that you just can't handle it, you shouldn't be in the studio, then it's going to scare you away. So my opinion is if it looks good, it's fine. If you look at the cover of Vogue, a lot of times it'll be this blown out background kind of wrapping around the model, completely smooth skin. That breaks a lot of rules. You're not supposed to have blown out highlights. You're not supposed to have blown out backgrounds. But it's whatever looks good. So that's the approach I take. Feel free to ask me questions. Beginning, I have a presentation covering kind of the words, the key phrases that are used in studio lighting, just so you're familiar with it. And then I'm going to shoot a demo with a model. Feel free to ask questions, especially afterwards if you have questions about equipment. Jim's here. So, all right, so my sponsors today are Broncolor and Miller's Professional Imaging. Broncolor, no joke, as David said, the best lighting you can get, bar none. It's absolutely incredible, and I'll tell you why, some of the differences. Now, of course, they're my sponsors, so I have to be like, they're great, they're amazing, but I will talk about different brands as well. So I'm not just going to say you only have one choice. I'll talk about some of the different lighting companies that exist, some of the options you have, but straight up front, this is the best if you want to invest in what the best you can get. Other sponsor is Miller's Professional Imaging. They are my lab, and they had some of the papers on your seats. They're the lab that I use to print everything. Everything I do, from my promo cards to my business cards to my prints for clients, it doesn't matter. They print that. And their sister company is MPix. So if you own a studio, you kind of go to Miller's, whereas if you're an emerging professional or aspiring pro, you do MPix or MPix Pro. So just an overview for that. Now we can get into the presentation. So I love studio because I'm a bit of a control freak, just a little bit. Because I can control everything. I can control what the model looks like, how she's posing. I can control every highlight, every shadow, everything that there is. Now, you can do that on location, but it's a lot easier in the studio. So this is a picture I took just to give you the heads up with my equipment in college long ago. You can make beautiful images with whatever equipment you have, but sometimes there are certain requirements that you need different equipment, certain modifiers, so I'll talk all about that. A lot of what I do is using 1 or 2 lights. I've seen photographers that you look at their sets, they have 18 lights up. That's their style, that's fine. There's a photographer, Jill Greenberg, who cites The Manipulator. If you check it out, if you look at the highlights, she probably has 8 to 10 to 12 lights in any given picture she ever does. But you don't need a lot of lights set up to make a beautiful image. So this is 2 lights, okay? And I'll just show you throughout. This is 2 lights. You have your main light to the left, you have a fill light from the back. So don't feel overwhelmed like you need to right away learn how to use 10 lights at a time. Most what people you'll see in magazines, in advertising, are probably 1 to 3 lights in general. All right, so benefits of studio versus on location or whatever else is you can control the background 100%. So it's not necessarily, you don't have to go out and scout and find the location that'll be perfect. You're controlling the background. You can build it in the studio. You can pick the color. You can do whatever. Second is posing. In the studio, you have kind of a confined realm for posing. So you kind of get in a groove of things. And if you're not worrying about different elements or people walking by, you can get the models so they're moving, so they're dancing. So if you are a senior portrait photographer, you have certain poses that you do every single time. So it's good for kind of consistency and getting in the groove of things because you have less external factors to distract you. Lighting, it's complete control. So that's one of the benefits of studio. You don't have to worry about external things kind of mixing. And the expressions of your subject, you can focus more on the expressions, again, if you're not worrying about other things. This is my studio. Just wanted to show you what it looks like. I just moved in there a month ago, and I like it. It's pretty cool. So again, 2 images, same lighting, softbox, fill light. I'm going to show you all these different modifiers. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this briefly. I'm sure most of you are here for strobe lighting, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about constant lighting versus strobe lighting, because some people do shoot studio constant lighting. So strobe is what you think of when you see the quick flashes. It's quick duration, it's using these packs, whereas there's constant lighting where it's a continuous light source. The light is constant, there's no flickering, there's no flashes, it's just a continuous light. Strobe is the most popular for still photography. However, you can do some different things with constant lighting that you might not be able to do with most strobe lighting. One of the big things now is, has anyone here tried video on their camera, HDSLR video? Okay, it's a few hands. Can't really do that with strobe. If you wanted to light an interview, or light a model moving, or tell a story, you can go on location and try to shoot like that, but you cannot do strobes with video. So that's a benefit of constant lighting. So we're talking about some of the difference between less expensive lighting and more expensive lighting. One of the biggest difference with strobes is if you buy a less expensive brand or just a more commonplace brand, you have a little bit of range in the power output. Some of them have, and I'll show you this, some of them you can actually change on the head, actually on the light, the power output, and some of them have packs. But in general, less expensive, you can't really pump the power way up or really pull the power way down low. So you kind of have a small range of what you can deal with. So constant light, let's say that you want a really narrow aperture. And if you look at this last slide, his eyes are in focus, but his chest and his shoulders aren't. Most studio light, you can't do that. You can't dial down so far so that it's so low power that you can shoot a wide aperture in general. So a lot of times people use constant light for this as well. Some beginning photographers are attracted to constant light because they can actually see it better. They can see exactly what they're going to get as they move the lights around, and the video capabilities. So that's why some people are attracted to constant lighting. Generally, like I said, it's less power output. You can dial it down, and that's why you can get those eyes in focus, the rest out of focus. So a couple things just about this, and then we'll move on to strobes. Okay, so if you're using constant lights, like if you're basing your light exposure off of these lights, you have to worry about all of the other light mixing in. So maybe there's a tungsten bulb in the corner. If you're exposing and that light shows up, I'll have a yellow highlight on my chin. Or maybe there's fluorescent lights above. If these lights were on, you're shooting constant, that green is going to mix in. So you have to worry about all of those different elements playing in. Whereas if you're a studio and it's a quick exposure, unless you're purposefully making the ambient show, if you're purposefully trying to get that light to show, it's not something you have to worry about. So that's just something to be aware of. I'm just going to skip those for a sec. So again, another wide depth of field, really narrow depth of field, eyes are in focus, her hair and shoulders are out of focus. All right, so I'm just going to talk real quick. Broncolor has their own brand of, basically, if you think about it, kind of like movie lighting. You have the HMI lightings, those really strong lights that they use, TV programs or on movie sets. And then another version that they also have, they're fluorescent lights, but they're not green. You know how when you think of fluorescent, you think of that nasty green color? They're bulbs, but they're balanced for daylight. So these are what people use for video and constant lighting. Those are the two main types, HMI or fluorescent. And if you want to try them out, a million places you can rent them from, because people rent things for movies. Movie companies don't own lighting typically. Some of them do, like Warner Brothers and whatnot. But you can test these out and rent them, see if you like it. Okay, I'm gonna do my water. Here we go. Okay, so let's talk about strobes. First thing is they have a highly variable output as compared to constant lighting. So the reason that this is so cool, this box, and I'll make Joel hold it up later. This is my assistant Joel. So he makes everything work, so I don't have to carry everything and put the lights together and stress out. Anyway, so you can control to 1/10 of a stop how much each light puts out. So you can tweak how much every single light, the power it's putting out, to the tiniest amount, which is good if you need a lot of control. Can pump up really high, go down really low. You have a lot of ability to balance with ambient light or just to put out a lot of output. Strobe is what you need if you want to stop action. You can do movement in the background if you want to. That's a little more technical. But if you have somebody, you picture your models jumping up in the air, doing a karate chop. You want to do maybe the strobe, really fast action. That's what you would use it for. Another reason that strobes are really good is you have a lot more light modifiers. So you have things like beauty dishes, silver dishes, soft boxes, wherever it is back there. And I'll talk about each of these different modifiers and what you use them for. Whereas in constant lighting, you can get those, but not as much, and it's just not as readily available. So you have all these different light modifiers to make your light really focused, or really soft, or really harsh light. The modifiers let you do that. Okay, so this picture is 2 lights, no modifiers whatsoever, pointed at a white background, pumped all the way up. So you can do things without light modifiers, especially if you're just trying to get into it. You want to invest in the good equipment, but you maybe don't have enough to buy a whole lot of modifiers. You can start off simply. You can make a lot of beautiful images just with that silver dish over there. That's kind of the base of what you would get. All the other modifiers are additional. But you can start with just those dishes and still make really high impact images. More examples, I'll talk about direction of light and highlights. All right, so a potential drawback of strobes, just comparing it to constant lighting, usually they require more power, which is not always true, but a lot of lights, you have to buy packs to power them, so you can't just plug and go and plug them into the wall. But sometimes that's true with constant light as well. And obviously you can't do video. So let me talk about exposure with strobes. All right, so does anyone know when you're in the studio, when you set your camera on manual to shoot, the only number that really matters after you set your ISO, so set your ISO to 100, right? The only number that actually really matters is your aperture. Because your aperture decides how much light gets in. Your shutter speed doesn't affect it at all. So if you're in the studio, you maybe want to shoot 1/25 of a second. The only reason that shutter speed matters is, let's say you have those fluorescents on. If you have a long shutter speed, some of that fluorescent light will come through. But other than that, if your camera can shoot with flash at 1/500th of a second or 1/60th of a second, the exposure of the studio lighting, how it affects your image, that studio lighting will not be affected by your shutter speed. Okay? So typically when you come into a studio environment, you put your camera on manual, and if you have your ISO on 100 or whatever you put it on, you usually stick your shutter speed somewhere around 1/25th of a second. Then you're just moving your aperture. There's nothing else you need to worry about. You're going to control the power output on the pack or on the light, but as far as in camera, the only thing you're touching is the aperture. Does that make sense? Okay. Next thing. Okay, so I was talking, this is where I need you. Okay, ready? So less expensive, less high-end lighting, you can a lot of times control, I'll have you look at that. You a lot of times can control the power output right on the head. So what it'll let you do is on the left it'll say 0, and on the right it'll say 3, and you just pump it up from 0 stops to 3 stops. So a lot of lights you just dial in the power output. But it's not that much control, and typically it's not as much power. For higher end, you have these things, and these are power packs. This is what the light plugs into, and over here is where you control these panels, is where you control the output. So I can click on these. Is that really heavy? No. Okay. I'm like looking at it, it's like holding his breath. You can control the output of every single light that's plugged in using these buttons. So in this case, I can have 3 lights plugged in. I can control the output of each one using each one of these dials to 1/10 of a stop. So whereas in another case, you'd have to, if you have the light really high, if the lights are up there, you have to jump up, try to adjust it, move over, grab another one. So, and you really can't adjust those as much. So this is pretty cool. So that's a power pack. Another really important reason why those are better if you're going to invest in lighting is recharge time. So if I'm shooting in the studio and it's plugged into the wall and the head is where you adjust the light, a lot of times I'll shoot and you have to wait for the light to recharge. You have to wait for the capacitor, the energy to fill back up. So if you're getting a model who's really dancing and moving around, you're clicking and you're not getting the shots you want because you can't just keep clicking. You have to wait for the light to recycle and go back through to full power. Whereas when you have a power pack like this, it's holding a lot of the energy in there. So to a certain extent, you can just keep shooting. And that can be really important just depending on the type of studio work you do. So those are some of the differences. That being said, I'm not claiming you can't make beautiful pictures where there is no power pack. You can still make beautiful pictures. Depends on what type of photography you're doing, what kind of needs you want. But that's kind of the point of power packs. You can have a lot of control and a faster recycle time. Okay. All right, just a pretty picture. All right, little technical thing, but this will come in as important later. All right, so how many people have heard of the inverse square law? Okay, good. That's not too bad. All right, so this is just the saying you need to remember. You double the distance, you quarter the power. Okay? So when you're shooting in a studio, when you have a pack like this, you can dial down your power. But let's say that you don't have a pack like that, or let's say you want to move your light around. If I double the distance of the light from the subject, it cuts that power in a quarter. So I'll demonstrate. If you're looking. Okay, so it's a little diagram. All right, so this is very technical. It's not like you need to memorize this exactly, but basically if you're looking at the half distance, it fills the entire square. As soon as you double that distance, the same amount of light only covers a quarter of the amount of area. So basically what that means is if you're in a studio environment, if you want to quarter your light, maybe you want to cut it down 2 stops. Like if the light's too bright, you need to cut it down 2 stops, you double your distance. So these are just some tricks. If you don't have a pack that can be as much controlled, why it's important for a pack if you have one. Let's say you're in a tiny room like this, and there's no way I can double my distance because I have people here, and I'd be sitting on top of them if I'm doubling my distance. So again, you can do both ways, but you double the distance of the light, and it just decreases the power. If you get twice as close, you quadruple the strength of it. So you can physically move your light to control it. If it's already pumped up on the back as far as it goes, or it's already dialed down as low as it goes, you can use the distance to control the output. Okay, so I'm actually serious about this. My choice is, so what do I want? Do I want strobe? Do I want constant? I use different lights for different situations. I have strobes in the studio. I use constant if I'm doing, I do these fashion video shorts that I'm working on, so kind of depends on what you need. Most people, strobes. Most people, what you need is strobe lighting. A couple purchase considerations if you're looking to buy studio lighting. If you look at the side of these packs and you look at and actually read on different packs, they have different wattage. So that means how much power they can actually pump out. For other brands, the heads will say how much watts the head can put out itself. So if you get you can get 400 watt, 800 watt, 16, 32, 72, it goes up. So about that, people say, okay, well, you know, and 1600 watt is much more expensive than a 400 watt. Why? What's the difference? Why do I need it? So if you're just shooting headshots in a studio, you probably are fine with 400 watt. You don't, if you're just only doing headshots, you don't need anything else. The only difference is, let's say that you do wedding photography. You're shooting in a church. It's a big open space. You have the bride and groom in the foreground, and you want to light the background. If you have 400 watt, there is no way that light is going to reach the background and fill the atrium of the church. It's just not going to happen. So in that case, that's when you need 3200 or 1600. So it depends on what you're doing. How much power does this actually need to be able to put out? If you're just doing small headshots, then it doesn't matter. Yeah? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 Right. So the easy answer is obviously more expensive lights, higher end lights hold the color temperature throughout. If you can actually rent color meters that will tell you, so if you rent the color meters, so if you have one of those, really the only option you can really do if you want it to be right is to gel it. There isn't another answer. That's pretty much it. Well, are you balancing with ambient light in that case? So if not, then yeah, you can just white balance on your, set the white balance on your digital camera to whatever your color meter says it is. So yeah, if you're not trying to balance with ambient light, then you don't need to gel it. Doesn't matter. If you shoot raw, you can just fix it later too. So both acceptable. All right, so we talked about that. There's nothing, I mean, that's all you can do. Okay. All right, so here's the power packs again, just showing you. Okay, so when you have one of these power packs and the lights, you need to have a way to make them flash, right? There's a bunch of different options, and I'll just tell you about the different options. One, the traditional old-fashioned way is sync cords. They plug into your pack or your light and hook into an output in your camera, and you shoot and the light flashes. I highly recommend against those because you will trip and fall. Like, that's just what happens. Or the model will, or the assistant, or whoever you're with, somebody will trip on it and fall. They're just really cheap, so if you don't have anything you need to start off, I mean, you can get them for like less than $30. It depends on where you get them. Okay, so the most popular option are pocket wizards and radio poppers. And pocket wizards, basically, they send a radio transmission. You plug one end into the pack or the light. The other end goes on the hot shoe of your camera. And when you take a picture, the light flashes. That's the most common. There's a 15 different combinations with transceivers, receivers, whatever, but that's the concept. There are less expensive versions of pocket wizards if you can't afford those up front. Impact makes a version that I used recently that actually worked pretty well. So, but this is the most common. If you're shooting with some of the bigger names, they actually will have the pocket wizard built into the pack. So you don't need the receiver end. Basically, you have the pocket wizard on the top, and it will just talk to the pack automatically. So a lot of them have that. In the case of Broncolor, they actually, where's my camera? They actually have their own little transmitter right here that talks to the pack. So it's not like you need to go buy pocket wizards. It talks directly to the pack. You can actually control a little bit of the output. You can control the output actually from this thing. So just check whatever brand you have. You might not need pocket wizards. Okay. Okay, just a little bit about my kit because people always ask me this. Canon 5D or Canon 5D Mark II. So a lot of people shooting higher end studio stuff, they'll shoot a medium format with a digital back, but most photographers don't own that. If you get a job, it's billed into the fee that's rented. So just a heads up, like when I'm shooting, that's what I have. I have my 5D or 5D Mark II, and that's what I shoot. But if it were a huge job, you know, billboard on the side of a skyscraper or whatever, okay, then you would need a little bit more and you'd rent medium format with a digital back, but typically not necessary. This is just how I shoot. There isn't a right answer, but usually I'm shooting a 50 millimeter and an 85 millimeter. I like fixed lenses. That's what I'm shooting. 1.4, 1.8, those are the apertures, but in studio it doesn't matter as much, so it's kind of somewhat irrelevant. And then some people swear by the 70 to 200. I don't use it as much. It just depends on what I'm trying to do. But really, 50 and the 85 are enough. And what is really good about those, they're very inexpensive. Both of those lenses are under $400. So if you are buying a whole bunch of equipment and you're looking to get your kit all set up, those lenses are inexpensive. Okay, so this is just a list. You don't have to know these. Yeah.
Does that work for your video too?
Yeah, definitely. When I'm shooting video, you can shoot whatever. If you're trying to do more zoom, because maybe you want the zoom action in the video, then the 24 to 70 is what I would use if I'm trying to get a little bit more movement or action within the shot. Okay, so I'm going to go through these, but these are all light modifiers. These are different things you can stick on the head to make your light do different things. It has different effects on the light. This is my lovely model, Catherine. Say hi, Catherine.
Hi, Catherine.
Okay, so I'll just sit you here. I'm just going to start off with normal portrait-y lighting. I'll probably have you switch. No, I'll just have you, I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to start with just one light source. If you have one light and you don't really have anything else to work with, my recommendation is that you just use whatever your main light is and pull the subject far enough away from the background so that they aren't interacting. I can set it up, it's fine. So you have to pull the subject far enough away so that her shadow isn't casting on the background. So that's what I'm going to do now, although it probably will because of our limited space here. So I'm just apologizing to you ahead of time. Okay, let's see. Let me get this set up. All right. Let's see. Okay. And I'm going to turn all the lights on. All right, and let me not get tangled. So remember how I was saying, like, you don't want to have a sync cord because then you have stuff like this. Of course, if you shoot tethered, you have that as well. But there are wireless tethering. The less expensive ones where it tethers right to your computer takes a long time for it to process. It'll take a long time for it to load. But there are high-end ones that tether right to your computer wirelessly very quickly. Okay, so I'm just going to use this. You can unplug.
You don't have to unplug it.
Just turn it off.
I think it's this button. Oh,
No,
got it.
wrong one. No, you turn the wrong one.
Modeling light on. I think your modeling light's on.
Oh, I just didn't turn it on. I was going to turn. I want to unplug that one.
Yeah, you don't
The
have
back
to.
one.
It's off.
Okay, so
It's off.
two-
You don't have to
Okay.
unplug it.
All right.
So you
Good.
can individually turn them on.
Okay.
and off.
All right. So can everyone kind of see her? Kind of. I apologize. What's that? The question was, how's Lightroom 3 compared to Capture 1? A lot of times, especially if you're shooting for a big clients and whatnot, you're using Capture 1 because you're using the medium format backs. They do different things. You have a lot more ability to make changes and do a lot more organization and preview kind of Photoshop adjustments, whereas Capture 1, you just kind of more or less capturing, doing very basic adjustments. So it depends on what you like. I like Lightroom. I use it all the time. Okay, so Joel, I'm going to have you move stuff periodically. I'll tell you what to do. All right, so if you look on your pack, do you have the ability to lift this for a sec?
not that one. That's probably,
Can you lift it?
probably a bad idea.
Yeah, but I have to show. I'm going to show. Okay. I know. I'm a poor boy. Okay, that's good. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so you see on the pack right now I have two lights plugged in, but I don't have the second one turned on. That's why you have the two little lines. And right here, this reading, this 5.9, that's telling you the output of the light in f-stop. So right now, it's 5.9 is what it's putting up to 1/10 of a stop. So I can keep pumping it up. I'm going to pump it up, so then go to, maybe I want to go to 9.0 or whatever. So then you can adjust right on the camera to 9.0. If you watch over there, you can actually see when I change my aperture. Do you see it changing? So that's just cool. Yes. So, okay, I know how to use Light Meter, and I use it sometimes, but I feel like people get very overwhelmed and feel like they have to use a Light Meter. And it's just another thing that you have to buy that's expensive that people get overwhelmed with. So in the days of digital photography, if you're using film, you have to do a Light Meter. In the days of digital photography, you really don't have to. My teachers would kill me for saying that, but they're also old and didn't start with digital, and they think it's, So no, they most So let me see if this is, but no, really though, it's not required. If you're working for, oh, sorry, wrong setting on. I think I screwed this up. No, let me mess with it for a sec. And I think I have this on. So anyway, long story short, it's not necessary. It will help you. If you know how to use a meter, it'll tell you what to meter her face at and what it should be, but it's not required. Let me just change my setting. Is there a way to reset this thing when I was dialing up and down?
No, you don't. All you have to do is power it down. Just hold it down. You going up and okay.
Okay.
If you hold it down, you go full stops.
Okay. Okay. And then test and dump it. I'm going to go up higher though. Okay, I can dump it. Okay. All right, hold on a sec. Let's get this. Oh, of course it won't work. Yeah, so what I can do is I'm dialing up and down. I can control my stops right on here. So I can keep dialing up and down to physically see it. Let me just, and I'll make it full screen momentarily. So whatever my pack says for output, if it says 7.1 is the output, then I can put F7.1. Right, but you don't need to do it that way. I swear this is horrible. You can just guess. Like, I swear.
Your pack is saying 7.1, but as you said with
The distance. Right.
so if you move your,
No, exactly. It gives you a starting point.
okay,
It gives you a starting point.
so it doesn't adjust.
Right, it has no idea. It's not like a TTL on your flash where it will actually read what your flash output is and then have that duration on based on however long you need it. That's just your starting point. I could definitely have a flash meter in here. It's just another thing to teach, so I'm just going to leave it nice and easy. Okay, so double click on it and make it full screen for me. Okay. And, oh, I have this nice thing in the middle, but okay. So the most common, this is what I learned in school. You ready? This really corny saying. When in doubt, paramount. And that is this front lighting. So if you look right at her face, look straight at me. Okay. So if you look straight at me, it's going to bring it up. I think. There we go. All right, so if you look more or less, you get this light underneath her nose. It's called butterfly lighting or paramount lighting. It's nice, basic lighting. And you can do this exact same thing with just a silver dish on top. This is one light. If you look, because of the angle that I have the light, her shadow is down here, so it's out of the frame. If I move that light down, the shadow would hit here, and then that would look the amateur I was telling you about, how they'd interact. So the way I have it, the light is down. So you still have, looking at her, paramount light. It gives structure to her jawline, and it gives shadow underneath, and it just gives you that little butterfly lighting. So that is just the plain old general paramount light. Those lighting diagrams I had up before, where I had paramount, loop, Rembrandt, split, back 45. Those kind of depend on how you pose your model, so I'll demo that. So, okay, so to start off, that is, and head straight towards me just for the demo purposes, look straight there. All right, so paramount. Now I'm going to have you move this. And if you see, you can see this is the modeling light. You can see I have my modeling light full power. Move the light over, head straight onto me. Keep moving it that way. Keep going. Okay, right there. A little bit back towards me. All right, see how it made a little circle off to the side of her nostril? It made kind of just a little shadow. That's called loop lighting because it makes a loop of a shadow beneath her nose. So that's another form. It gives a little more definition to one side of the face than the other. So, okay. Okay, it's going to load. All right, so when you do that, see how one side of the face begins to actually be carved out because it put a shadow on that side of her jaw, so it gives more definition. So the first lighting scenario is a little more beauty light. It's just kind of even light all around. It's centered. As you move it off to the side, it begins to carve out shape of the jaw. So that's generally good for an individual. Just gives their face a little bit more definition. Okay, a little bit more. Okay. All right, right there. Let that go. Okay. Oh, sorry. We'll see if I have to do your face again. All right, sorry. Chin down one more time. All right, so if you look at this one, loading. Okay, so that's Rembrandt lighting. That is when you have the triangle underneath the eye. This works really well, A, for men, if it's just much more dramatic. Men's faces can usually handle it more. Or for beautiful women, it's not a problem. And it's much easier to define the face. Can you take the reflector, please? So if you think that shadow is a little too dramatic for what you wanted, but you still want that nice pocket of light next to the eye, take your fill card. Okay, look right back here. Okay. So when you put the fill card up there, it lightens the shadows. So it lightens the shadows a lot, but you still have that highlight under the eye. So it still gives more definition and more drama. So let me just go back here for a sec. And I'm going to put, okay, so if you see, oh, well, you can see it over here. Here's Rembrandt lighting with more definition. Here's Rembrandt lighting when I use a fill card. You still have that pocket of light. There's still a shadow side to the face, but it's much lighter and airier in general. So to put these up, what we have so far. Yes. I have little things like this they have little arms. So I basically have a stand with a little arm with a C-clamp on the end. Most of the time, I honestly do have an assistant on hand. And the shooting I do, there's either a mom there to photograph, with the daughter. So the mom will hold it for me and she doesn't care. Or if I'm doing a fashion shoot, I have a makeup artist that'll hold it, a hairstylist that'll hold it for me. So very rarely do I have to hold my own stuff, which sounds really snotty, but there's always somebody else around. Yes? I would say C-stands. C-stands are the most heavy-duty, stable stands that you can get, but those aren't practical for going on location unless you have a crew. So yes and no. I mean, depends on what you need it for. Like these are impact stands. The broader the base you have, the more stable it will be. So that's something you want to look at, is how broad the base is. That's why we originally switched. That light over there has a much narrower base at the bottom, whereas this one's broader. And a lot of times if you have a less stable, because this is not stable, especially for such nice lighting, what you do if you don't have a more stable stand is you get sandbags that they sell. You can make your own, you can make your own sandbags, but you can also buy them and you just put the weight on the bottom and it'll be stable enough. Especially if you're shooting on location. If on location on purpose you try to bring less heavy stands, there's wind and people walk by, so it's something to be frightened of. What's that? Oh yeah, I mean you can do it. Yeah. Okay, so Paramount, first one. Loop, second one. Rembrandt, third one. Rembrandt with filled card, fourth one. Those are the super, super basics of them, of lighting. All right, let me take it a little bit more to the side, look forward. I'll have him do it.
Do you ever adjust the bring that in and out the same way you would the light? Does that make the bounce?
Yes, so I was processing what you're saying. So if you're looking at that last Rembrandt light, you can leave that there. I'll have you grab that fill card again. I'll do 2 shots. Do 1 shot right up next to her face. Okay, look right here. Back up just a little bit, Joel. You're in the picture a little bit more right there. Okay, now back up really far, right there. Okay, so if I am close up to her face, there'll be a lot more fill, and that shadow will be much softer. Whereas if I back off the card farther, I'll get a little bit of bounce, but not as much. So, comparing these, this is the one with no fill, this is the one with a ton of fill, and this is one with medium fill. So it just kind of depends. And you can actually see it when I'm looking through the camera. I can see how the fill is affected and figure out how close or how far I need it to be. I'm going to move this back. Will you bring it back over here? I'm going to show you a really common beauty light technique. Let's put it to the very front. This is what I do all the time for beauty light. Is you do your Paramount light or loop, more or less, kind of in the front. And then you take, you're good? Okay. And then you take 2 fill cards and you can kind of do a V underneath her chin. And it catches the light and bounces back up and fills in the shadow, so it's much airier. Just bring it nice and close. Good. Good. Okay. And it will change your exposure because there's going to be a lot more light, so this is going to be a lot brighter. But let me darken it down real quick. Yes. Yeah, so that is something that will help if you're photographing somebody that has a few rolls down there. When I'm photoshopping that out to decrease it, typically I'm lightening the shadows because it makes it look less defined. So if you have a fill card to fill it in, the only issue is if you have a man and you're trying to carve out the jaw, to give him a little bit of definition to give strong cheekbone, if you stick a fill light underneath that, it lessens that effect. So it's kind of, you might want to put the fill card much lower, maybe down near the lap to fill it in a little bit. Typically, I do a lot of it based on how I pose. So I mean, if he's facing forward, what you do is you shoot slightly higher above, so he has to look up a little bit, and it stretches out that area, so it's not as heavy. So I just would kind of get up on a stool so that he has to lean forward and look up, and it will lessen that. So I try not to do it with a fill card just because it gets rid of some of that manliness. It's true. Okay. Next one, will you do split light for me? Okay, let me go back. But anyway, if you look at this picture, she still has shape and definition, but it's much lighter. And that's honestly, if you see cosmetic campaigns, that's what they do. They use maybe dramatic side light with a lot of fill cards. So it's just really light, smooth, creamy skin. She has ridiculously nice skin. So makes it, you're welcome. Okay. So this light, look straight on to me. Okay, I will just tell you, this is not light you typically use. Don't worry, you won't like it, just warning you. This is something more that I might do with a man. If you do dramatic split light, and I might move it forward just a little bit, bring it forward just a tiny bit, right there. Right there. Good. For a man, if he's facing forward and you're doing something really dramatic, if you have it split light, if he has a nice enough jawline, this could be a nice image. I seldom, if ever, use it on women, although I showed you that image before with a really dramatic Rembrandt. You can use it, just generally you avoid it. Okay, now. I know, she's like, no more, no more. Okay, now turn your body that way. Just right there and head back towards me a little bit. Okay, so now, this is, by moving her body, I moved it so that the light is doing Rembrandt, but now the shadow side is towards you. So when I was saying before, when I had her here, and I put the light over here, that's Rembrandt. When I move the light back here, I can still do Rembrandt if I move her, and now that Rembrandt is going to be towards me. So that's more of a loop lighting. I'm going to have you turn your head right back towards me a little bit, right there. So that's a little bit more Rembrandt, and this would be short lighting. Okay, it's going to come up. There you go. So that's kind of more Rembrandt short lighting. That's more dramatic. That first shot is dramatic when she's facing forward with the Rembrandt, but when the shadow side is towards you, it's darker. It's more serious, mysterious, and whatnot. Works for men and women. This is the lighting I was saying sometimes I recommend for heavier individuals. I guess the logic behind that is you're putting the shadow side, so it's bringing less attention to the width of the face. It's kind of narrowing the face down if you use lighting like this. Okay, try this again. Okay, Joel, can I look into the light real quick? Good? Right there, just for a sec. Oops, double click. Okay, hold on. So now again, this is more of what you would get from Paramount lighting, but it's like when you move your camera to the side. When you're doing Paramount lighting, you get that little butterfly under the nose, and the shadows are falling behind. So if you move your camera to capture where those shadows are falling, that's when you get something like that. So that's the same setup as Paramount. She's looking straight up here, got the little butterfly underneath the nose, but now the camera angle is different. So that's why you're getting the shadow to shape out the face. Again, depends on the individual if they have a nice profile. When you're posing people, if you see how I framed this right here, just a note about profiles. Typically, you don't want to do totally profile. Typically, you want to do this where you can see the eye or at least a little bit of the eyelashes. If you look at traditional portrait paintings, where you guys know how in the old days they would do those profiles where they would just paint the profiles right on the brooches. Even though they were profiles, you would usually see that back eyelash. So that's just something typically when you're shooting profiles, you usually include a little bit more of that. So I'll have you turn your head just away a little bit more, right there. Good. And so sometimes I'll ask people if they have a better side of the face, if they have a preference, and then I try to work with that because people are really picky and about their own face. They know what they like. So anyway, so that's that lighting. So they know what they like for their face. In general, I'll analyze it and see if there's anything that I know that I need to fix. Like, for example, somebody who has a weird bend in their nose. There's models that have cool bends in their nose, that's what they do for modeling, but most regular women don't like it. So I know in the most cases, I don't want to turn their head sideways. There's things like that, but usually I just kind of feel it out. I take some pictures. I shoot, if I'm just doing a portrait session, I usually shoot 300 pictures for like just a portrait of an individual comes in for their headshot. I mean, not necessarily for a headshot, but they want their formal portrait done. So we have plenty of angles to choose from. Questions on this before I keep moving on? Okay. All right. Joel? So anyway, so that's my quick Lightroom black and white retouch. It's dramatic. It's elegant. You can still see the eyelashes in the back. She has definition, shape to her face. It's dramatic. Okay, I'm going to have you move this. Okay. All right. Scooting in here. And now just move it back even further. All right, so when I'm doing a shot with hair light, I'm shooting from back 45 of where her head is. So I'll have the kicker at back 45. I know obviously that doesn't usually work for portraiture, but yeah, you can just set it right there. Turn your head that way. That's good, right there. Yep, head down. Let's see. And let me turn it black and white real quick. So this is kind of like Rembrandt. You can go, let me crop in and show you. So it all depends on how the light is shaping and molding the face. You have those different positions. You have your Paramount, your Loop, your Rembrandt, Split, back 45. Those are kind of your basic positions of light. But then all of that changes based on how you move with the model. So back 45, which is almost where this was, if we had more space, it'd be back 45, would be just kind of lighting the back of her head until you turn her face to the side and it actually carves out, and it does a side view of what Rembrandt looks like. Okay? Questions? Ready for another light? Yes. What do you mean, like the fact I'm 7.1? Not really, because what I'll usually shoot at is I usually shoot at 11, but my subject is far enough away from the background that there is background blur. And I typically am shooting either a solid background or a background that already has kind of a texture that looks out of focus, like a muslin with soft textures. If you can shoot wide open, sometimes it is nice because then it'll be more in focus eyes and softer other features. So if I want to, I can dial this way down because I can do it with this light and shoot at 2.8. In this case, I can shoot at 1.8 if I want to do that. With women, most of the time, they like that better. It's just softer on the rest of the body. But if you're inexperienced at shooting at wide apertures, then you have the fear of possibly misfocusing if you're shooting really wide. If you ever shot the Canon 1.2, I mean, if they breathe, it goes completely out of focus. It's crazy. It's really cool, though. Like, don't get me wrong. It's an amazing lens. But, like, half a millimeter will set the eyes completely out of focus. It's crazy. Okay. More questions? Next thing? Okay. So next thing. I'm just going to do the same thing with the softbox, if we can switch.
Do you want me to get up?
I think you're okay.
Just turn up the modeling.
Yeah. Okay. So if you notice, it was crisp, but it wasn't harsh. It's crisp light. It has strong shadows, but it wasn't really a harsh light. I think it pops. I think it pops out of place. Right there. Okay, yeah. I don't want to break it.
There we go.
Get it? Got it. Okay. Okay. This has no diffusion. You can add the diffusion, but so if I added the white diffusion in front, then it would have just been that much softer. So I mean, as you said, this is obviously harsh light. That's obviously very crisp. But when you switch to something like this, not so much. It's really not very harsh. This is very soft, very even lighting. And that's why I like this tool. I can do the most with it because if I want harsh lighting, I can have harsh lighting. If I want soft lighting, I can have soft lighting. This is Beauty Dish. This is Beauty Dish, the white Beauty Dish. And they come in different sizes. I shoot 22-inch typically. Okay. All right. Back in the front. Let me turn my modeling light on. Okay. All right. I'm just going to do a demo. I'm going to have you come over here just a little bit. No, you're fine. You right here. Okay. So let me just demonstrate. I'm going to scoot past you. Sorry about the lack of space. Okay. All right. So this is much. So. Let me try it again. Look back at me. Okay. Oh, wait. Hold on. Oh, that's okay. All right. Loading. Okay. So if you look, it's still defined, but if I had a Beauty Dish on there, it would be much more crisp. This wraps around the face more. So I will show you a side by side of the same light with a Beauty Dish versus a softbox. I'll have you lift it up a little bit more, make it a little taller. Okay. All right, now what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you pull that back as far as it goes. That way.
Oh, I see.
Keep going. And kind of over in this corner. Okay. Okay. So just demoing. Okay, you can probably move it back. So the image got darker, and we did change the shape. Let me show you the softbox loop compared to the Beauty Dish loop. Okay. So this picture is the Beauty Dish loop, and this picture is the softbox loop. And they're very similar. They just wrap differently. See how that line right here is more crisp? The definition there, whereas this, it kind of wraps a little bit more. And the angles, let me show you the difference of angles. I'm going to bring you the angle up here, Joel. Put it paramount again. And then I'm going to move on. We're going to do two lights, and you can ask me any questions. Move it right here in front. Okay, paramount right in front. Really loop. Okay, so first raise it up really, really high, like as high as it goes. Okay, that's it. Okay, look right at me. Okay, and then lower it really, really far. Okay. Good, right there. Okay, so you have the direction of the light around the model. You have the height of the light up and down, and your fill cards to all control it. So real quick, the difference. And if you look, here's what I was talking about here. You see that shadow. Oh, she's too light. Hold on. I'm going to darken her down a little. Okay. So now if you look here, you can see that shadow in the background. But this is when the light is up high, and you see that shadow underneath her nose, make that little loop right there. Whereas when you bring the light down, the shadow is kind of minimized. It goes straight back because it's not casting a shadow down on the nose or up. That's about as low as I'd ever want to go, because as soon as you go lower, it gets demonic. It gets that creepy lower light that you don't want. But they have different feels. And this is, in this case, is where you'd want to add another light in. So I'm going to add another light in. Yes? Oh, drink. Question real quick before I add my next light. Does everybody understand those light modifiers? Yeah, to the right. Yep. Yes. Do I look at the histogram when I shoot? Yes. Yep. That's usually what I do is, because I'm not just how I shoot, I'm not changing the light too much. I kind of find what I want. I check the histogram, make sure nothing's getting clipped or nothing that I don't want to be clipped is getting clipped, and then I just shoot. And because it's constant, you don't really need to worry about anything changing. All right, so now I'm going to add that light over there. Do you want to put the barn doors on for me? Okay. All right, so he's going to add the barn doors. Any more questions? I'm just looking while he switches this. No, we're good? I think. Okay. All right. Nope, sorry. Good? You got it? Do I use grids? Okay, grids are these little circular pieces, typically, that for silver dishes, or you can actually put grids in your softbox, and they're like they sound. They're grids. They're grid patterns. When you use a grid, it helps to focus your light, and it reduces bounce of light. So they'll have like egg carton grids that go in the softboxes that just focus the light, so there's less bounce. The only time I use grids I didn't see where the question came from. The only time I use grids is if I'm using a silver dish or a snoot where I'm trying to get the light even more concentrated. They come in different degrees, so there's like a 10 degree has one size hole, 20, 25, 30. So yeah, if I'm really trying to get a dramatic effect or I want to do that spotlight on the background, I'll definitely add a grid because then it makes it a really focused circle. So, okay. I'll probably need you to stand over there to adjust. All right, 1 sec. I'm going to make this higher. Say that again? Oh, white balance. Sorry, I can't hear. There's a fan here. How do I white balance? So do you want to know the answer I'm supposed to say versus the answer that I really do? The answer I'm supposed to say is that I use a white card, like a gray card to white balance. The truth is that I just do whatever I want and just kind of leave it. So what people recommend for studio is that if you put it on daylight balance, because you have a daylight balance light. That's what studio lights are, daylight balance. They're not tungsten, they're not fluorescent, they're daylight. You can buy some that are different, but just for general purposes, that's what it is. People recommend that you pick a white balance on your camera, daylight, for example, and shoot like that. Because if you go into Lightroom, you can make the white balance adjustment to one image and then sync it up for all of the other images so it's the same. Whereas if you're shooting auto, based on shadows and even how it picks up the colors of the clothing, it will vary the white balance each image if you have it on auto. So the correct answer is that you should be picking daylight and just shooting on daylight, and then you're shooting raw and you can sync it up later on. My confession is I usually just do it in auto, and I'm only picking, when I'm all said and done, maybe 3 images a shoot. So I'm going to be going in and setting the correct white balance and the correct black point for every image anyway, and I'm only doing 3. So that's why I don't really care as much, but yeah, does that make sense? My right answer versus the real answer? Excuse me? Okay, so if you look, you can see the highlight. I don't know if you guys can see this, but if you look, you can see that highlight on her jaw and in her hair. For women, especially in beauty photography, a lot of times they will add that highlight on the jaw because it pops out the jaw. It's very elegant. A lot of times for women, if they have the neck exposed on that side, they will have women kind of turn and arch their neck, and you get those tendons, which models have, and I only kind of have. But you get those tendons, and it will illuminate them and define it. So there was a shot that I had earlier where the model had the flowers in the hair, and if you notice, there was a highlight illuminating on the neck. It's just considered a thing of beauty. Okay, shooting. Okay, so. And let me just test. Right. Oh, I gotta set my Lightroom to pop up correctly. And I'm gonna dial down let's bring this up. So if you look, you now see that highlight on her jaw. I'm going to have you bring the hair back over because I'm going to compare the two shots. Okay, let's look right straight at me. Let me shoot at. Okay, look right at me. Okay. Come over here and show you. So if you look between these two shots, the difference between them, maybe you want something a little more dramatic, but I think that this one on the right looks much more polished. There's definition between her and the background. She has that jawline carved out. There's definition between the hair and the background. So typically you want to have some kind of back hair light, whatnot. Make sense? Well, okay, so it depends on the distance you have. At this point, because of what my distance is, I have them about equal. I have them about equal power, just if you look at the distance here. You usually want it to be brighter than your main light in general, but not overpowering. There isn't a formula because it depends on how much definition you want. I usually start at 1:1 and then pump up or dial down based on appearance. So, and there definitely are a million formulas. I hate not to give you a formula, but that's just my starting point. So let me turn you around this way. Okay, turn your body this way. Flip the hair off your shoulder for me. Kind of put it back there. Good. Look into that light. Good. So by moving the light around, and that's weird. I gotta get rid of that Lightroom thing. This needs to move for me. There we go. So moving the light around, I have the shadow in the front. If I didn't have that hair light in the back, that would all be in shadow. But I added the hair light so it gives it a little punch. This is a more of a traditional portrait that you would see if you see maybe like a dignitary who's not face on. They kind of arch to the side. They have the shadow shaping the face, the hair light in the back. It's very typical. So do one more with your hair like that. That's hard profile. Turn your head just a little bit towards me. Just a little bit. Right there. Good. A little less. And your eyes right there. Good. I got you blinking. Sorry. Sure, that's no fun. So, just get the eyelashes. You have the definition in the hair. You have shadow into the face. I'll do one more where you look at me. Turn your head and look at me. Good. Chin down a little bit. Good. Okay. Let's grab a drink. So I have her look at me, which means her face is going to turn away from the light, which means that the shadow will get heavier. So it's more dramatic when her head turns this way, but then you have eye contact. One of the things you want to avoid when shooting profile, I'm going to have you go back to profile again. All right, look your eyes. Look your eyes up, and now look your eyes to the left. Okay, now look your eyes to the right. Right there, good. Okay. Something you want to watch out for if you're shooting profile shots are the left is not what you want to do. The right is what you want to do. Can you tell why? Right, so you can't see the pupil in her eye. So on the left, a lot of subjects will have the tendency to look right into the light. You say look into the light, so look into the center of the light, which gives you the whites of the eyes. And that's just creepy. Like, it just looks creepy. So typically what I tell my subjects to do is when they have their head like that, I tell them to look at the front edge of the light. Or I'll just hold my hand out and say, look over here, look up, whatnot. Just people by default. And if you're not watching, if you're trying to do profiles, you'll have 50 shots where all you see are the whites of the eyes. So that's just something to watch out for. Question before the next thing? No? Okay, good. All right, Joel, I'm going to have you shrink that. Okay, very good. Good. Same thing, good. Oh, didn't go. Hold on. What am I doing? Let me put this back in. Okay. Head a little bit towards me, just a little bit more. Okay, good. So I'm just going to compare. For barn doors, what you want to do is these two control the spill top to bottom. So if you're doing maybe a more full-length image, you're going to want to open these up so that it hits top of the body and down to the waist, whatever. These are the focus of the beam. So if I want it to hit the jaw and hit the hair, I have it open more. If maybe she's facing this way and I just want it on the hair, I don't want it to spill over onto the jaw, that's where I close these center ones down. And you can actually see that happen. And you can actually see, you can see it down here when I close it, you can see the difference. So a lot of times you're just controlling this based on what you want. Another thing that I use for this background, this backlight for barn doors, is a softbox, but it's narrow. It's about that big, so it's maybe, I don't know, a foot wide, and it's tall, and that's called a strip light. I don't have one of those here, but a lot of times if I want something where it's a full-length image, she's standing up posing. These barn doors, if I do this, that spill's not really, it's not really controlled. If you look out here, it just kind of spills out, right? Whereas if I have a tall, skinny strip light, it's going to keep an even highlight from the back, top to bottom. So I do have one of those in my studio, yes.
The strip light is like a modifier like the softbox?
It's just like a softbox. It's just this long, so it'd be kind of just in the middle. It'd be about a foot wide. And some of them are this tall, some of them you can get much taller. Yep, just one head. Yep. And I mean, you could always stack heads, and if it's a model on a, if she's on a ladder and has a huge gown, like you could stack lights and do stuff like that. But I saw 2 questions. Yes.
Can I cheat this? If I don't have a strip light, can I duplicate it or why?
So, okay, yes. One of the things that I did or do when I don't have a strip lights or barn doors is if you have, where's my fill cards? Can you grab one for me? So if this is just this silver dish, you can do pretty much the same thing if you rig it up so that it makes a strip out of the middle. I have also done before, I'm shooting with a beauty dish. I don't have barn doors, I don't have a plain dish, but I do have a softbox. Then I'll do something like that where I'll have a bunch of these so that it's just the narrow strip. So yeah, I mean, you can definitely cheat it. It works fine. There's an image I have in my portfolio. If you go on my website, it's an ice queen photo. It's this woman nude with ice on her head, whatever, fashion stuff. And so she's turned to the side, and she has a nice narrow strip light on her back, but the studio I was shooting at didn't have a strip light, and barn doors weren't doing what I wanted. So I used a softbox and 4 of these to get the effect I wanted. So yes. Yes? Sorry, honey.
Single or double net?
So
That would even the light, so you can balance the light.
you can do that. I just would say it's not very common, only because it ends up being more hassle. But yeah, you can do that. And someone was asking about flags before I forget. Okay, so sometimes they call black pieces of it's almost like thick pantyhose, black pantyhose on a frame. Those are called flags or gobos, which stands for go-betweens. So if you're shooting a model and maybe they have their chest exposed, just like a bare chest, if that is being lit brightest in the picture, that's all you're looking at. And a lot of clients will come in, the women, seeking to emphasize what they think are their best attributes, and they have they have very low-cut shirts. And then that's what the light's hitting, and that's what you're seeing. So one of the things that you can do in the studio is use a flag or a gobo. They're basically just black. You can make your own if you take pantyhose and hangers. And it's just, the light can still get through it, but it decreases the amount of light getting through. And what you would do is you would hold that flag in between the subject and the light. And it just decreases the amount of light hitting the chest. Oh, I'm setting this up. Do you want to do one demo? You want to close that down and I'll just do a demo? Now, of course, this has no light getting through it, so it's not going to be the same effect. They do this a lot in jewelry photography. So they have a picture of a woman. She's, have her head back, whatever, and she has an earring. They still want light on the face. They still want to maintain that direction of light. They still want the light coming from the top left, and they still want the shadows. But they want a lot less attention to the face and more to the ear, the necklace. So what they'll do is they'll use a flag to go in between. So flag off just kind of the lower half. But I'm going to do one without. So look right here. Okay, right there. Perfect. Okay, now do one with. and just watch the light in the chest. Bring it a little closer to her. And a little closer right there. Okay. So now obviously she doesn't have chest exposed, but I'll show you the differences. All right, so if you look 1, 2, can you see that difference? 1, 2, we'll put them side by side. I'm going to put these two side by side. See how that jacket's now much darker? Can you see that? I don't know how well these screens show it. But now the jacket's much darker. So if you can imagine the person is wearing a light colored shirt or they have a bare chest, it would make it much less distracting. And that's what they do in beauty photography. So, good there? So you can, yes. I mean, it would be more like, sometimes inside of these, like, does this have a diffuser in it?
No.
No, this one doesn't. I mean, what you can do as well is, so I was talking about those grids that you can buy for your lights. Some soft boxes will actually have pieces of diffusion material that hang kind of mid softbox that you can add. And so you can add the light, make it more diffused, add more scrim effect to it. Just a side note for people, scrim in its general term is like a giant, related to Broncolor. They also own California Sunbounce, and they sell scrims, and what they are these big frames, typically big frames, with just white diffusion material. It's basically like a much nicer version and more diffuse version of a white sheet, but it's usually more plasticky. But some people use white sheets if they don't have it. But it kind of strings between, and if you're outdoors and it's really bright day and sunny, they usually hold the scrims over the models in the sun, and it gives this gorgeous soft light like a giant softbox. In the studio, a lot of people use scrims for food photography because it gives a broad light source. It kind of mimics what sunlight looks like without being sunlight. So, and I also want you to can you talk about your events for that PPE weekend? All right, so I'm going to just do one more thing, and I'm going to have him talk, and then I'll take a few more questions, and then we'll be good. Okay, let me just one more thing. Okay, I'll have you hold this. So I will tell you, I was just going to demonstrate one of my most common lighting techniques. Will you hold this for me? Will you just hold this right here? Okay. So one of my most common lighting techniques, just to finish with that, is beauty dish or softbox kind of off to the front 45, because that's giving shadow and shape to the face. Then, to define from the background, I have barn doors hitting the hair, kind of hitting the jawline a little bit. And then if it's okay. I'm going to go back to my presentation. And so that's very common. And let me just show you, so I get a chance, a couple diagrams to go try. Okay. Couple diagrams to try just before I forget. So this is the beauty box lighting I was showing you. You just you can fill in from the left and the right instead of on the side. So you have beauty dish in the front, either paramount or loop, and then fill cards to the left, right, and bottom. And it just fills it in all together, or fill cards in a V. This is the lighting effect. And if you look, the beauty dish is high, but not really, really high. It's kind of above head level, but still enough so you can see it peeking out at the top. So that's beauty box lighting. This is something that I didn't do, but that's because of the environment we have. So flare, you're taught, is wrong. You're taught flare in camera is bad. You're not supposed to have it. One of the things I'll do is I'll have the beauty dish off to one side so that it's kind of doing paramount. If you look, you can almost a little bit see the shadow underneath her nose, just barely. So it's paramount lighting. But then I have barn doors pointed at the background as high up as it goes. So it gives that highlight on the hair, but blows out the background. I had a shot before that looked kind of like a flapper, where she had kind of finger curls in her hair. That's the same lighting technique I use there. It's used a lot in beauty. It's just that lens flare soft look. The image, when you get it in camera, it will be kind of muddy. If you've ever shot lens flare, if you've shot outside, when the sun's coming in, it kind of bounces around in the lens and it makes it not as crisp. So you do have to make it more crisp in Photoshop. It's just not really avoidable if you're actually doing lens flare. This was just plain old beauty dish. I use it all the time. Just high beauty dish from the side. I think I have one more. And then this is what I would say most common for basic. This is basically what I was just showing you. This is pretty much the light I was demonstrating as my most common. Is I have a softbox or a beauty dish, in this case off to the left. Barn doors off to the right to give me this rim light. So you see she has separation of her hair. Separation on the arm and the back. And then so this shadow isn't too dark, I have a fill card over here. That's most common basic beauty fashion setup. Really easy, looks great. It gives shadow, so it's defining her jawline. It's defining her waist. It's giving her shape, but it's not too harsh. Okay, so two things. This background is gray to start off with. It was kind of gray-blue textured. But the best thing you can do is if you have a white background and that's all you can shoot with, I would demonstrate it here if we had more space. If I take this setup and I move it from here to 10 feet that way, that background will be almost black in my image because there's nothing illuminating it. So that's usually what I do is I will usually, if I'm shooting, the psych walls, they're white. That's what color the walls of the studios are. If you want to use that, but you want it to be black, you just drag the model 15, 20 feet away, and it will go black just by essence of no light hitting it, and that's what your exposure is. So that's a solution I do a lot of times. I think that was my last slide. I had one more. All right, this is the really last one. Okay, really last one. This one, I had the beauty dish in the front, and I took 2 barn doors, one from each side of back 45. So if you look, let me see. If you look, I have a hair light. You can see it right here on her hair. But you also get this really nice, elegant, tiny highlight on the lips, on the neck, and on the chest. And you get it to be really narrow by narrowing those barn doors really small. So you make it really small. And that's the lighting technique I use all the time. Great for beauty as well. All right, so one second. I'm going to have you, if you'd like, to talk about your PPE events. I'm going to be speaking at Photo Plus East, over here, the Javits Center. I'm speaking like 5 times, so you can just look for me. I have a panel, random note, let's do my self-plug, get it over with. I wrote a book, it came out in May. It's New Media and Social Networking for Photographers, so it's about blogging, it's about Twitter and Facebook as it relates to photographers. I have some if you want to come buy some from me. But other than that, I'm speaking on that topic, couple fashion photography topics, and I'm just going to be around so you can come look for me. But I'm also speaking for them, which you can talk about.
We're going to have our own event at the Terminal Warehouse on the seats. These event postcards were placed, giving you directions. But we have free seminars for all of you. Just go to our website that's listed here and register for them. The only one that is going to be charged for is Defense and La Forêt. But we'll be there on Thursday and Friday, October 28th and 29th. We welcome you all to come see all of our products there, as well as possible to be there as well with us as a separate photo venue other than the Javits Center. So we're separated. That's on 11th Avenue between 27th and 28th Street. And please come and see some of the free seminars with the photographers that we have listed.
I'm speaking Thursday morning.
Yep. You come see Lindsay again Thursday.
So I'll be there.
Same weekend, isn't it?
That is the same weekend, yes.
Yeah, yep. It should
The
be
address
on there.
is, yes, that's the Terminal Warehouse. It's on 11th Avenue between 27th and 28th. It's only about 4 or 5 blocks away from the Javits Center. So if you go to the Javits Center, you can walk over. If you go to our place, you can walk over to the Javits Center. It is free of charge. It's on the first floor. It's all on the first floor.
Okay.
It's called La Venue, but you'll
La
see
Venue.
a lot of different. You'll see a lot of signage pointing you in the right direction.
And if you just related to this, before I forget to say, I'll let everyone leave. You can ask questions. I'm going to post the notes for these on my blog. It'll probably be Saturday. So if you look, you just go to my blog. The notes also, there's a section where it says workshops or classes and then notes. It has notes for most of the classes I teach if you want to see, or if you've seen me before and haven't seen. There's Lightroom, there's some studio stuff. But I'll put that up there as well as a couple notes from the retouching tonight. So thank you for coming, and feel free to come up and ask questions.